Donald Trump could end a program that has already granted work permits to hundreds of thousands of undocumented immigrants who originally came to this country as children as early as originally reported today. Now they're saying perhaps over the weekend, perhaps by Monday, maybe they try to squeak it in when the news isn't watching as closely. And it's already received a lot of opposition. Now, some of the people opposing this move, ending DACA, are the normal sorts of people that you would expect, but there's also some voices that you might not. And we're gonna go over some of those on today's show. First here is Speaker Paul Ryan.
The president might be looking at pulling back DACA, the Dreamers Act.
Yeah, I mean, I actually don't think he should do that. And I believe that this is something that Congress has to fix. Let me back up for a second. President Obama did not have the legislative authority to do what he did. You can't, as an executive, write law out of thin air. And so that's very, very clear. We've made that very clear. Having said all of that, there are people who are in limbo. These are kids who know no other country, who were brought here by their parents and don't know another home. And so I really do believe that there needs to be a legislative solution. That's one that we're working on. And I think we want to give people peace of mind. And so I've had plenty of conversations with the White House about this issue.
So obviously they've clashed on a couple of issues. This looks like it's going to be another one. And he was talking there about the people who, he said in his words, have never known another country. And it's not a small group. Already nearly 800,000 have received work permits and deference from deportation. And remember, this program was only originally set up under President Obama. It hasn't been around for decades and decades. And so imagine how many people it could help if Trump doesn't kill it this weekend.
Right, so look, to be clear on a couple of things. First of all, on the substance of it, you had to be brought into the country when you were under 16 years old. You have to be a quote unquote productive member of society, meaning it has specific definitions. You have to have a job. Actually, 5% of them have created their own jobs and are entrepreneurs. And the list goes on. And you have to finish high school and then either go to college, enlist in the military.
Some of them have purchased homes in the United States.
Yeah.
So these are people who came here when they were incredibly young. They, in a lot of cases, came here when they were children and their parents smuggled them into the country. And so this is the only country they've ever known, and they've built their lives here.
Yeah.
And so the fact that Trump is considering just deporting them or ending this program under Obama is devastating, not just for the individuals who will suffer from this deportation, but also the US economy, which is something that I think Trump supporters refuse to even acknowledge.
Yeah,
to Anna's point, I believe 16% of them, either 12 or 16%, have homes, have bought homes. I just pictured, like when I read that passage, all these empty homes, ghost homes. Yeah. Well, where are the people who bought them? Well, they were deported based on something that happened decades ago.
Yeah. And keep in mind, these are people who did not have access to government programs that Americans do, right? So in the vast majority of cases, they didn't qualify for federal student loans. They didn't qualify for government assistance, despite what Republicans will tell you. Now, certain states might have certain laws that do offer some help, but the vast majority of these individuals built lives without any government assistance whatsoever. These are, to say they're productive members of society doesn't go far enough, right? Yeah. They were able to overcome certain obstacles that American citizens can't even overcome or don't have to overcome. And to treat them as if there's some criminal group of people that don't deserve to be here is just disgusting and lacks compassion.
Yeah, on the issue of the mechanics of this, Paul Ryan brought up executive orders. So look, I think there's an interesting case to be made there. So Obama, his position was the executive branch gets to enforce the law. So I'm not going to enforce the law against these people who were brought into the country, not against their will, that's too strong, but having no volition in that.
They didn't even have the ability to legally consent.
Yeah, they couldn't consent, they could not consent. They were brought in by their parents as kids. They did not take any act as an adult. So they're not like the illegals as people put them and et cetera. In order to do that, you'd be an adult, et cetera. So he's saying, I'm not enforcing that part of it. I got some issues with that, but the guy who
he's putting that at a far lower level of priority, effectively zero priority.
That's right.
But you can choose if you only have so many resources. Like maybe we'll get to some later.
Okay, but let's be consistent here, both us and the Trump supporters, like Paul Ryan. So Trump then says, well, I I'm going to sign executive orders and I'm going to say, for example, okay, I'm not allowing Muslims certain Muslims into the country. Well, I mean, did you pass a law barring Muslims from those countries? No, I didn't pass a law, I just did an executive order.
Did Trump pass a law banning transgender military members? No, he just decided randomly when he realized that there were no legislative wins under his administration that he was gonna pander to his base and send out early morning tweets about banning transgender people, right? He didn't even talk to the Defense Department about that. So this whole notion of like, oh, I didn't like what Obama did with this executive action, please spare me the tears. The reason why that happened was because members of Congress keep using the issue of immigration during their campaigns, pretending as though they want to do something. They want to be leaders, they want to be tough. But when it came to the issue of Dreamers, they didn't want to do anything. There was absolutely no progress. And so what are these kids gonna do? What are these people gonna do? They're worried, they don't know how they're supposed to pursue their lives or their careers. Obama takes some leadership and he took some action. I'm totally fine with that.
Well, look, I just want to be clear to finish my point. So these executive orders are tough because yes, it does fall within the parameters of the executive branch to enforce the law, but it can be abused and you can go too far. And where you draw the line on these is not an easy issue and it's not a black and white issue. But we got to try to be consistent on it either way. And so these guys that claim that they hate Obama's executive orders love Trump's executive orders. And so Paul Ryan, luckily you're in a great position to do something. You're the Speaker of the House. You can pass a law, to Anna's point. You should, and everybody agrees, Democrats and Republicans agree, you should pass an actual law, so get to work.
Yeah, and you can go back to any number of vague quotes from Donald Trump from the primary or the general election where he said he was gonna treat this group of people with heart. I'm sure he thought that was a policy statement. It wasn't, it was vague, and he's gonna turn on his previous words, but you could use that.
Sorry, John, because there was an update right before we came on the show. You don't have to go back to the campaign for Trump absurd quotes about Dreamers. He was asked about it today because this action is imminent, and he said it might happen today, it might happen over the weekend. The White House earlier said put out a statement saying it'll happen on Tuesday. It might happen on Tuesday. So Trump, of course, preempted him anyway. But when a reporter asked him about it, he said, "Oh, quote, we love the Dreamers. We love everybody." What does that mean? And how can you love the Dreamers and then deport them out of the country?
It means at 8 p.m. tonight, because it's Friday night, and every Friday night he thinks about a new group of people that he wants to destroy, he will go ahead and end the DACA program. I guarantee it. 8 p.m. Friday night. That's what always happens.
That's
that
a strong guarantee. Very specific.
Yeah, and I mean, when you think about 800,000 people, like as Anna pointed out, the immediate economic impact, and you could look at any number of different impacts of suddenly plucking a significant portion of the entire US population out and then throwing them overseas to a country that they know nothing about, have no support structure and don't own a home, don't have a job, have no legal paperwork there either. So that's a terrible idea, but then think about the ripple effects from it. That's potentially hundreds of thousands of spouses and children, friendships, clients and businesses. They might be in schools at this point, friendships that are disrupted, organizations, political or otherwise. I mean, the ripple effects are massive. They're impossible to overstate.
And keep in mind, okay, and I'm gonna repeat this every time the issue of immigration comes up during the Trump administration. Keep in mind that while he threatens to deport these people who built their lives here in the United States, he had applied to increase the cap of foreign workers coming into the country just so Trump Industries can hire more foreign workers. The day after he did that executive action, Trump Industries applied for more foreign workers, okay? So this is disgusting to say the least.
I just want to show you two more of the people who are criticizing him. It's not just Ryan. First of all, if we could jump ahead, Senator Orrin Hatch said, "I've urged the president not to rescind an action that would further complicate a system in serious need of a permanent legislative solution." He says that Congress should be that solution. Well, I mean, you got a senator, you got Paul Ryan, you could probably rally up a couple of others if you want to actually do something about it. But we also have not just politicians, but pundits. So as Jared Jackson pointed out in our morning production meeting, it's apparently that time of the year where Geraldo is accidentally right about something. And for slightly naive and kind of ridiculous reasons, but here is his advice for Donald Trump.
I just want to say this, and I want to be crystal clear and unmistakable in my message to Donald Trump. You cannot do this. You cannot make true the false stereotype that you are cruel and uncaring. You must do the right thing. These are the most vetted immigrants we have ever had. We know their background. They've been fingerprinted. They have to be crime-free. They have to either be gainfully employed or in college. Many of them, most of them have citizen siblings. If we were now to unleash the power of the federal government to root out 800,000 of these DREAM Act students, it would permanently tarnish the reputation and legacy of President Trump, and it will affect how I feel about it.
Oh my God. It will affect the way Geraldo thinks about him?
Slightly
feels about him.
A little.
So look, that sounds so ridiculous to 99.9% of Americans, right? However, keep in mind that the one person who cares about what people think about him the most is Donald Trump.
And he is watching that at that point.
And he's watching that. And so look, Geraldo actually used what I believe a pretty smart tactic. He's not trying to make any economic arguments. He's not trying to talk about anything that's nuanced or smart. He's just saying, don't do this because people are really gonna dislike you. And it's going to ruin your legacy, right?
And talk about it like you're talking to a child and shaming a child, because that's the only way he's going to process it. I don't know if he doesn't. The problem is I don't think he really cares what Geraldo thinks of him.
Well,
if you could get like gut filled or something.
He might. So it was. Look, at first I read the quote of Geraldo's about how it will make true the false statements about how you are cruel, and I thought, oh my God, Geraldo is dumber than I thought. And then I realized, no, actually, like you guys are saying,
strategy,
he knows that Trump is likely watching Fox News, and it's actually somewhat of a savvy strategy to say, now, Mr. President, you are wonderful, and everybody knows how great you are, but don't let those false statements about deriding you be proven true by doing this thing that I'm against.
Yeah, it just, in practice, it sounds a little bit silly.
Yeah, it sounds preposterous, but you're right, John. He's talking to a child, and that, and a petulant, angry, thin-skinned child. So that is probably an effective way to talk to him.
And finally, I mean, to put this in a slightly larger context, I mean, we've pointed out, I know Anna has cited this statistic many times over the past couple of years, that while there's been for decades upon decades concern about there's people flooding over the border and our country's just getting full of undocumented immigrants, and there's all this fear. The fear is not necessarily based on the facts, it's just an emotional response. As we will point out many times, people come in and people go out. You can't explain that, Republicans, but that's the way it is. Lots of people come out and lots of people go back. The border is porous, but not just in one direction, it's in both directions.
That's right.
But the fear and the hysteria over the supposed like flood of immigrants led them to tighten up the border and make it more difficult to transit one way and then back. So the people who came in couldn't afford to leave again because they didn't know what would happen to them after that. So instead they simply stay. And every time they try to tighten the border to keep people out, what they do is simply make it that anybody who does come in does not go. The exact opposite of what they have hoped to achieve. And so we don't know what might be coming after DACA is destroyed or not, but you can be sure based on history, it's gonna be incredibly counterproductive.
So I have last couple of thoughts. So one is that I looked up the number, it's 16% of them have homes. So that would mean well over 100,000 abandoned homes. It reminds me of like some of these TV shows, the 4400, the Leftovers, where people are like mysteriously disappear. And there's all these missing people. And be missing people, ghost towns, etc. It's preposterous. And then
it's gonna hurt your property values.
Think about that. And then finally, guys, if you're worried, look, this isn't racial. This is just about our wages are depressed because of immigrants, etc. They really pull the wool over your eyes to get you to think that the most powerless person in the country, the guy who just crossed the border, doesn't have any power at all, is the one that is affecting your wages and setting the rules and screwing you over. No, it's the powerful folks in the country that set the rules. And so if you want your wages increased, there's an easy way, you should get legislators who would increase your wages. Now look, they can't make you an engineer if you're not an engineer. We're not talking about that. We're just saying that if you're working hard, you're working 40 hours a week and you got a minimum wage job, the minimum wage is not kept up with inflation. It is preposterous. It's criminal what's happening with minimum wage. Argue for the powerful to increase the minimum wage, which is actually gonna help your family, and it's actually gonna increase your wages instead of taking your aggression out on people that don't have anything to do with setting those rules.
Yeah, and while it's easiest, I think, and most appropriate because of the fact that they are the least powerful to map out how the government can directly impact those at the lowest end of the wage scale, the government, thanks to the fact that they subsidize on the state and federal level businesses in 100 different ways in terms of tax incentives and regulation, all of that, they do have the ability to influence wages for those who make more than the minimum wage. They could make all sorts of government money contingent on continually increasing wages at all different points of the wage scale. They could do that if they wanted to.
You know who suppresses wages? Think about it for a second. Corporations do.
Yeah, there's
Why?
one person who can raise your wages. He signs your check. He chooses not to, and you can be sure his wages are going up.
So now the reason that I point that out, look, it's such a matter of logic, right? So if a corporation is going to make more money if they pay their workers less, who's more powerful? The CEOs and the executives and the lobbyists that give billions of dollars to the politicians to set the rules on their behalf, or the guy who just crossed the border? Who affects your wages more? Are you insane? Of course it's the people who are donating to politicians. That's why your wages are low. I've shown you this chart before. They diverged in 1978, productivity and wages were going along excellent so far. Since then, American productivity has been excellent. The line continues to skyrocket, but your wages flatline. The difference between those two lines is $12 trillion. It didn't go to Mexican immigrants. It went to the richest people in the country. Wakey, all of this is fear mongering to try to get you to go in the wrong direction. Support independent media. Come join us at the Young Turks. TYTnetwork.com/join.